Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Randy Speck. I'm chair of ANC 34G, and I represent the single member district 34G03. And that's basically the area between Nebraska and Utah and Broad Branch. And we welcome all of you here tonight. This is our regular meeting on the fourth Monday of February. We meet on the second and the fourth Monday of every month. And we'll introduce the other commissioners now. Connie, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Connie Chang. I am the newly elected commissioner for District 5, which is east on Connecticut, starting at Legation, going up, hooking around Western down Broad Branch Road, and then back into Legation, but it comes down in a little bit. It's like a dreidel. Is the only way I can describe it. Anyway, it comes down on Legation, Chevy Chase Parkway down to Jocelyn. So I'm happy to be here.
Peter?
I'm Peter Gosselin, also a new commissioner. I represent the district that runs from the Western Avenue border with Maryland and the Chevy Chase Circle down to Connecticut, the west side of Connecticut, back to 41st with a peninsula in Connie's district running basically between Legation and Kanawha back to Chevy Chase Parkway.
Lisa?
Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. My name is Lisa Gore, and can you hear me?
Yep.
You're freezing occasionally.
301, which are you losing me?
We are.
You're breaking up.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna sign out and come back in.
Okay. We'll catch you in a second. John, you want to go next?
Okay.
Okay, I'm John Higgins. I am the district SMD 02. The territory here reaches from Oregon on the east to Utah on the west, and Nebraska on the south, and up to Moreland on the north. And like several others, I am a freshman representative this year. We're gonna be freshmen forever, guys.
True.
Chris? You're muted.
Got it. Chris Frombaluti, District number 7, which is the area bounded by Military, Reno, Nevada, and Nebraska. Welcome, everybody.
Michael?
I'm Michael Zeldin, also new this year, 3G04, which runs from essentially Lafayette Elementary School to Wisconsin Ave to Western Avenue, and then part of Broad Branch and part of Utah, with Lafayette being the largest facility in our district, as well as the park and rec center.
Okay, I'm going to wait just a second and see if Lisa comes back on quickly. Well, we can go ahead and now talk about the procedures that we're going to follow tonight. This is, again, a virtual meeting that we've been doing since last April, and we probably will continue to do for a while longer. We're using the Zoom platform, and that means that we've got the webinar platform. So that means we've got the commissioners as panelists who have their audio and video, and everyone else's audio and video is off. But Lisa Gore, as soon as she returns, will be able to elevate anybody who needs to speak to the panelist status, and they'll be able to have audio and video, and also will be able to share their screens. So we've got several presentations tonight to do that. If your name on the participants list is not accurate, please rename yourself so that we'll be able to recognize you. You can also use the chat and the Q&A functions tonight. We'll try to monitor them and see if we can give answers to questions as we go along. But if we can't do that, we're going to make a copy of it, and we'll try to get back to you as we go through the meeting or after the meeting. Okay, I'm hesitant to go forward without Lisa because we really need her. And we've got, who is this raising their hand? Let's see, it's.
Randy, do we have commission business at the end?
Michelle Woolen.
Move forward?
Pardon?
Do we have commission business toward the end that we could just move forward while we're waiting for Lisa?
We could, but we really need her for that too, because it's the minutes that are, that she's
okay.
prepared. So I think we need that as well. We can go ahead and adopt the agenda. The agenda has been posted on our website and on the various listservs. There's been one modification to the originally posted agenda, and that is we've dropped off the surveillance discussion of the surveillance, transparency, and accountability until a later meeting, probably sometime in March. And then we're going to add one other additional matter, and that is a discussion and possible vote on a resolution on the small area plan community engagement that Commissioner Goslin has prepared. Are there any other modifications or changes anyone wants to make to the agenda? All those in favor of adopting the agenda, raise your hand. 6-0, okay. And Michelle Woolen has her hand up. Could you put, if you have a question or would like to be recognized, please indicate in the chat. And Lisa is back now. So Lisa, the only thing you missed was the adoption of the agenda, which was 6-0.
Thank you.
It's obvious, Lisa, we can't go forward without you.
You want to introduce yourself then, Lisa? You broke up before.
Sure. My name is Lisa Gore, and I'm the commissioner for ANC 34G01. And my single member district covers Hawthorne and Barnaby Woods, which is basically from Oregon Avenue along Western, past Pinehurst Circle, a little down Tennyson, Beach Street, and back up to Oregon Avenue to Western. Thanks for everybody for coming.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. All right, we've adopted the agenda. So the next item on the agenda, the first item on the agenda is commissioner announcements. And I have only one tonight, and it's just a reminder that the council's oversight hearings are continuing. There were hearings today before the Committee on Transportation and the Environment. And then upcoming hearings will be held for DDOT, for the District of Columbia Public Schools, the Department of Aging and Community Living, DC Water, Washington Metropolitan Transit Authority, the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, and the Department of Health, among others. Every agency will have an oversight hearing, and those are available for anyone to testify. If you've got a particular experience with some of these agencies and you'd like to tell the council about it or the agency head, you can participate in those hearings. And you can go to the DC Council's website and look for the 2021 performance oversight schedule, and you'll be able to find the detailed schedule for all of these oversight hearings. Okay, any other commissioners have announcements? Lisa?
Yes, just want to continue the announcement that the ANC continues to solicit volunteers for the Racial and Social Equity Standing Committee. The opening period for that was January 25th, and we're going through March 21st and taking nominations for volunteers. So it's a 45-day solicitation period. Thus far, we have 16 volunteers district. So I'm really, really happy with the numbers that we have so far. And that's people that are new to the standing committee or new to the task or wasn't participating in a task force on racism, as well as some members that are seeking to return from the task force on racism. So if you are interested, please send an email to myself or Randy, and we will get you connected with that. We'll also probably hold an interest meeting for those that are interested in the new standing committee sometimes in mid-March. And my second announcement, I will be having a single member district meeting on March 6th at 3 p.m. And that is going to primarily cover an issue along 31st Street Northwest involving a railing that has been malfunctioning and was replaced with something that the community opposed and has been opposing for about 2 years. So I'll send the Zoom link. Anyone within the district is definitely highly encouraged to attend, and anyone within the ANC that wishes to attend, feel free to jump on. Thank you.
Okay, any other announcements from any of the commissioners? Okay, we'll go to community announcements, and I know of two. Matthew Acho, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but if you could elevate Matthew, Lisa.
Can you raise your hand, Matthew? Thank you.
Can you all hear me?
Very bad feedback.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay, all right. I was on my phone too, so I'm gonna make this quick. Thank you for having me at the ANC meeting. My name is Matthew Acho. I'm Community Resilience Manager with Serve DC. I'm also one of the district volunteer snow program leads. And this program basically helps older residents and those with functional needs who are prone to injury kind of with shoveling their snow. So in an effort to support these residents, we're trying to recruit volunteers to provide snow removal service. And we don't typically deploy volunteers unless there's 4 inches of snow. But we do need more volunteers in Ward 3 and 4, specifically Ward 4, because we're looking at about 444 seniors that don't have a volunteer match to them. So, winter's still here. It's not quite over yet, but we're obviously recruiting people for the next year too. So if you have any interest, you can either access our sign up on snowteam.dc.gov, or you can reach out to us at dcvsp@dc.gov if you'd like to volunteer. And we have a PowerPoint that I can throw in the chat because I know I got limited time, and that's fine, but I can throw that in the chat for you all. But that's really the only announcement I had.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I'm sorry you reminded us that winter is still here with us. We're still gonna have to put up some more of it, but I guess that's the way it's gonna be. Peter, did you have a question or?
Just Matthew, put your email in the chat too. So if there's anyone getting in touch, we can reach out to you.
Sure, of course. Yeah, I can do that.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Matthew.
No problem.
The next community announcement I know of is from Erkin Ozbeck, who is the manager, I guess, of the small area plan process that's going on at the Office of Planning. Erkin, there you are. Lisa's got you plugged in right away.
Hey, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, commissioners. Thanks, Commissioner Speck. So my name is Erkin Ozbeck. I'm a neighborhood planner with the DC Office of Planning, and just wanted to let everyone know we are having the public kickoff meeting for the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan next Thursday, March 4th at 6:30 p.m. It is a virtual meeting. And there are 2 ways to join on the project webpage, which I will drop into the chat right now. And you can also call in to join the meeting, and there's a phone number. It's 855-925-2801, and I will drop that into the chat as well. And all that information is on the project page. And there's an opportunity to register for the meeting as well. We're really looking forward to getting this project started, getting the process started with community. The public kickoff meeting is going to be a chance to for us to explain what a small area plan is, what role it will play in the future of Chevy Chase, the topics that are focal to the Chevy Chase small area plan, and how folks can participate in the planning process and stay involved this year. This is something that's been discussed at this ANC for over a year and at a few recent meetings, and so we're really happy to get this project started and get it going.
Okay, thank you, Erkin. Any commissioner comments or questions for Erkin? Michael? You must be muted, Michael. We can't hear you. We still can't hear you, Michael. It doesn't look like you're muted, but nevertheless, it's not working. Connie?
Could I ask a question while Michael gets
Certainly.
his mic to work?
Certainly.
Erkin, how many people now have provided input on the survey on the project website?
Yeah, so we have some opportunities for folks to ask questions and share in different places on the project site. I don't recall. I can check actually. I do know we have about 70 people signed up for the meeting so far.
Good.
So that's good. Last time I checked, as far as comments, we had about 220, but I think that's increased in the last few weeks as we've been promoting the website and the meeting more, and folks have been getting more engaged. You can sign up on the website, I should mention also, for emails so that you'll get email notifications about the meeting and about other opportunities to stay engaged throughout the process, project milestones. That's really the best way to stay in touch. We promise we won't bombard people with emails, but we will try to keep it sort of succinct and specific to sort of key events and activities.
And one last thing, could you also send us maybe in the chat if you had a flyer that we can then post easily on social media? That would be very helpful.
Definitely, yeah. We have a small poster, and actually the library was nice enough for us. They put it up in the window, and I was actually out on Friday and visiting some businesses and putting up like Magruder's and some other places. So I'll share that with the commissioners. And it's like a letter size, 8.5 by 11. Folks can print it or put it in an email. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Peter?
Erkin, is there a way to optimize the website so that you can find it? I mean, what I've been finding is when I put in Chevy Chase small area plan, you end up having to, at least I end up having to go into other websites and find the buttons to get me there. So it doesn't come out. It doesn't. It'll give you city sites from which you can get there. But I mean, for residents, particularly residents who are not as tech savvy as yours truly, I'm worried they're never going to find it, so if there's any way to get it to come up higher on the Google search. Yeah, we'll see what we can do. We can maybe post it in a few other places so that it the robots learn better on how to elevate it. But that's helpful feedback. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, is your audio working now?
You'll have to tell me.
Yes.
Okay, so Erkin, the only other thing is, and maybe everyone knows the answer to this but me, are you posting all of this on Chevy Chase listserv, Nextdoor, Neighbors, all of the other mechanisms by which people try to stay in touch with what's going on in the community?
Yeah, we posted in the Chevy Chase .io listserv last week, I think, and we'll probably do it again at the end of this week. Next, we're on Nextdoor as well, and we have a community advisory committee that's made up of most all of the active organizations in Chevy Chase, Historic Chevy Chase, the Citizens Association, and so we've been pushing that to them as well to share with their networks, Northwest Neighbors Village. So we're trying to get it out as many places as possible, but we're always looking for more venues. So if there's something we're missing or you can suggest, just shoot me an email, let us know, and we'll try to get it there too.
Yeah, the only one that you didn't mention is this Chevy Chase Google Groups. That's an additional one. But my experience with Chevy Chase listserv is because it comes out with so much stuff all the time, posting it close to the meeting, like the day before the meeting will, or twice before the meeting, is most likely to get you a response 2 or 3 days or 4 days before it gets lost in
Right.
giving away free shovels and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, I know there's a lot going on. Typically we try to, our communications and promotion sort of ramps up sort of the week before and then a couple days before the event through social media and through all these outlets. So that's helpful. We'll make sure we do that.
And then the last question is, to the extent that our ANC through its regular meetings can be helpful in augmenting your community outreach. I'd love to talk about that with you to see whether or not, as part of our ongoing meetings, just like we are doing now, we set aside a few minutes or otherwise to continue to keep people updated and keep them in the loop. I think we can be a good partner in the expanded communication that we think the community wants.
Yeah, definitely. So Commissioners Chang and Gosselin are on our Community Advisory Committee for the exact sort of purpose to make sure we have a direct link to the commission so that we can be workshopping ideas like this throughout the process. And I'm happy and I'm working with a couple of colleagues on this project to do this sort of thing, sort of like a community announcement, or as we're further down in the process, if there's like a specific agenda item that can be related to a specific milestone in the plan to kind of get a little bit more in depth, that's certainly something that we expect and would like to do.
Yeah, it's my interest is mostly gathering as much community feedback on the proposals as we can, so that if we as commissioners need to vote on it, we'll have as best a sense of what our residents think as we can acquire.
It's great. Thanks.
Okay, any other commissioners with any comments or questions for Erkin? Erkin, thank you very much. We appreciate your stopping into our meeting.
It's good to see some new faces at ANC 34G, and looking forward to working with you all on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erkin. All right, the next item on the agenda is the discussion and possible vote on the Episcopal Home for Children's application for a historic landmark designation for its campus on Utah Avenue. And John Higgins, it's in John Higgins' single member district, and Chris Frombeluti, who has a lot of experience with similar kinds of historic designations, is also going to help guide us through this. And so I'll turn it over to John and to Chris.
Okay, Chris and I visited the facility this morning, and it was a very impressive visit we had, and we thank Stephanie for guiding us and giving us a tour. I'd like to just mention on a historical basis, Chris will take care of the architecture aspects of it and that historical landmark status. But to some degree, the center is.
Excuse me, John, just for a second. I know that there are several people from the Episcopal Children's Center who are available on here, and we might want to have them on the.
Promoting them now.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think
Thank
Stephanie
you,
is here, and Allison Prince and Jonathan Mellon, I believe. So I would like to address, to some degree, I was going to say that the center is sort of a living memorial to a social movement, which was the welfare of children. I just did a little bit of research here, and there was some advances were made in the early 1900s related to that, including the proposition of creating a children's bureau, which first was introduced to President Roosevelt and Theodore Roosevelt, and then it was enacted by President Taft, I believe. And in 1909, there was a White House conference on the care of dependent children. This is part of a whole social movement, including Hull House in Chicago for displaced people and so forth. And yet the Episcopal school here had its beginnings in 1894 at Colonial Beach. And that tradition has continued through to this time. When Colonial Beach was very successful, that's when they decided to move to Northwest Washington And in 1929 is when the Episcopal Center was opened. So I just wanted to mention that. I think I'll turn it over to Chris now, and he'll talk maybe just a little bit about the architecture, and then I guess Stephanie, you can take over and introduce your colleagues and make your presentation.
Yeah, I really don't want to say too much about the architecture because it's all going to be covered in the presentation. But I will just make the remark that, visiting the site, the outside, I think is definitely special. Those three buildings are special buildings, well-known architect, very nicely designed, and the campus immediately surrounding them is also quite unique. So for the exterior, I definitely support the nomination. I'd like to hear a little more about what your thoughts are on the interior. I must say I wasn't quite as impressed as the report sounded, even though there were some elements in there that did seem interesting. So I'd like to hear what everybody else has to say. So.
I can jump in and just do a brief intro because I'm the zoning lawyer who's helped out the Episcopal Center for Children. I also live in the ANC on 33rd Street. I've been here since 1989. And I really was so excited about the opportunity to work with the Episcopal Center because I've walked my dog by this buildings more times than you can imagine. So I knew that the Episcopal Center had closed down, and I was really so gratified to hear that they care enough about the property to make sure that no matter what they end up doing with it, it's historically protected. So Stephanie and Jonathan, Stephanie from the center and Jonathan, our architectural historian, worked really hard to put together a very, very comprehensive landmark application, and we'd very much like your support. I don't know who's next. Is it Stephanie or is it Jonathan?
I guess Stephanie can speak
I'll
next.
jump in. I first just want to acknowledge some of the commissioners that I've had the pleasure to meet in the last 2 weeks. I sort of went from not knowing many of you to recognizing most of you on the screen. So it's good to have met you in person or spoke to you by phone. So it certainly is my pleasure to represent the Episcopal Center this evening and just talk a little bit. I mean, I feel like I have my own roots at the Episcopal Center too. I started back in 1991 as a social worker there and progressed to the chief social worker and then program officer and now CEO. So I feel like I might have to be landmarked myself. I've been with the center for quite a bit. So I appreciate speaking this evening. I did, John, you meant Commissioner Higgins just mentioned some of what I wanted to mention in terms of the social history for the Episcopal Center. Back at the colonial village that he mentioned in Virginia in 1894 is when things began with our roots, and starting with underprivileged children even then. And it wasn't until afterwards that shortly after 1901, realizing that in fact, a summer camp wasn't enough. And in fact, how to continue to serve children in a more full way is how it became more of an orphanage, if you will. And that was in Anacostia. It continued in Anacostia until closer to, in 1907, I should say. That's when the diocese came into view and needed to help in terms of management of the center. And shortly thereafter, I would say around the late 1920s, is when it expanded to the point that by 1929, as Commissioner Higgins mentioned, is when the Episcopal Center ended up at the site that we all know of, 5901 Utah. So since then, I could just say a little bit about how that I think the commissioners that saw today saw that homey sort of environment, an opportunity for children to learn. And even then, when it was still more of a residential facility, to learn in a home environment where there was a dining room and living room and dormitory quarters that could feel like they were in a home environment. And we began and continued in that way since then. And we continued that way even as a day program. And as you all know, we did end in June 2019. And I'm going to say more of a pause, because in lots of ways, what we've recognized is that there continues to be a gap and a need for serving emotionally challenged children here in the city. and believing that there's a way to sort of re-envision what we were doing and come back in that same accord. So the plan, even now, is to continue in that way. And so yes, we're in a cease operation status now, but with the intention of coming back and serving the community that's been so dear to us. I know for me, being at the center, I still walk those corridors, those historical corridors, and remember the talent shows and the plays, and even hosting a carnival that we did, a fair once for Lafayette, when Lafayette School was going through their renovation. And so, you know, for me, when I walk the halls and why they're quiet now and masked up for COVID, I have still very fond memories of the activities that went there. I should mention that the students all received special education. And in addition to that, we were a therapeutic center. So therapies were there, not just individual counseling, but also for occupational therapy, speech and language services as well. So there was a richness that students could afford all in one place. It wasn't something where they had to go and get these services in various different locations. So it really helped to be educated and fully served there in a comprehensive way. And that's our belief, to have that kind of comprehensive, holistic approach is what we intend to resume. So I certainly am glad for the opportunity to represent the center. And again, as Allison mentioned, hoping that we can landmark our facility to greater ensure that we'll be able to return to the work that's been so dear to us. Thank you. Jonathan, maybe after me, unless there's, I see.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good evening. As Allison and Stephanie noted, we greatly appreciate you all taking the time to speak with us this evening on the proposed landmark nomination. It is going before the DC Historic Preservation Review Board this coming Thursday. They have issued a staff report, which you all may have seen, written by Tim Dene. Just to give you a little background on how we approached this with the DC Historic Preservation Office, Stephanie was an incredible host. We had David Maloney, the State Historic Preservation Officer, and Kim Williams, who is their National Register Coordinator, come out to the site. We spent half of a day walking the entire site, going through all the buildings, answering questions that David and Kim had about the site. And I think, as you all know, the commissioners who visited the site, what's pretty remarkable about it is how intact it is. The three buildings that were designed by Appleton P. Clark are basically intact. There have been a couple of small additions to the rear elevations, but otherwise they are what they were when Clark had this vision of creating a campus that had a residential character. He was pretty, he identified how important it was that this campus fit in with the community. So he wanted it to have a residential scale and character. And he went on later to write a book in 1945 about campuses. He also designed Hillcrest in the district and various other ones throughout the United States. And so this is really an exceptional example. And in our landmark nomination, we talk about how it meets two criteria. National Register criteria A, which is history, for the history of orphanages and the design of the national movement for the care of children that began prior to the turn of the century and then continued all the way through the 1930s. And it's also under criteria C, for a significant type, again, the design, the layout of the campus, as well as the work of a master, Appleton P. Clark, who you guys, I'm sure all know, designed numerous buildings throughout the District of Columbia, ranging from apartment buildings to institutional buildings. I do have a presentation which I can share with you if that would be helpful.
You can put it, I guess, on your share screen and.
I think I may have to, let me make Jonathan co-host. That is probably necessary for me to do. Okay, Jonathan, if you want, you can share it, I think.
I'm not the most technically savvy person, so bear with me. All right, can you all see this?
No, we cannot.
Okay. Let me go back to Zoom.
You'll have to hit share content
Okay.
there.
Oh, share screen.
While you're working on that, let me just say hello to Allison Prince. Allison, haven't seen you in a while, but
I know,
Allison,
we worked so hard together on Ingleside.
yeah, we worked a long time on that.
No, we
It's
did.
very, very successfully.
It really has been a great project. I didn't work with you on the first wave of Ingleside though in '92, did I?
Right. No,
Only the second wave.
right.
No, you were great to work with. This is a great ANC. I like being part of this ANC. Very efficient.
You too, Allison. Remember, we worked together longer before.
I know we did. I can't remember what it was. What firm were you with?
I think it was the historic district, wasn't it? When we were,
Oh, yeah.
it didn't make it.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the historic district, you know. My house would be very much captured, I know, but I really fight those.
Sorry, I'm not, so for advanced, I clicked on share screen. It says who can share, only host all panelists.
Well, I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share.
Okay.
Would it help if Jonathan sends the slides to you, Randy? And
We
then you
do have them.
Yeah, if someone else could just share them.
Sorry.
So Allison
Well,
and Jonathan, while we're saying hellos, I could tell you that I race bicycles with John Epstein.
I thought I've heard the name. Yes. I didn't think it was the same Michael Zeldin.
Yeah, we're both on DC Velo.
Oh, wow, that's
So-
great. Yeah, he's still working.
Yeah,
Lisa,
I spoke to him this morning to help me understand
I don't have
upzoning.
access to share either, Randy.
Huh. Well, I don't
Yeah,
know how
I
to
think
do
it's
this
only-
then.
Yay, it's
Oh,
working,
there it
Jonathan.
All
There we
right.
go.
All right, I am.
Again.
Okay, great. So hopefully you all can see this.
We
Yay.
can, yes. Very
Um,
good, Jonathan.
I think you all know the site very well. In doing the research, what was interesting was how much grading work they did to the site to respond to Clark's vision for how he wanted the building sited. You all know where this site is located. I don't think I need to go into too much of the history of how it developed over the years. But what you can see, what I want to show you, take note of on this screen before you right now, is the 3 buildings that were designed by Appleton P. Clark, and then that central quad, which is ringed by those lovely mature trees. And that is really the area that we feel is the important section that needs to be landmarked and retained, and DC HPO is in agreement with us on that. As Stephanie noted, the history is really remarkable. Obviously, this is kind of my area that I love. But when you go back and look at all the people who were involved in it, as you probably know, the historic preservation movement and also the movement for the care of children was often led by women. And so Mary Davenport was one of the main figures who worked on the establishment of the Episcopal Home, along with her husband, the Reverend William Goss Davenport. And as you noted, this originally began in Virginia, and then was in Anacostia, and then moved across into Northwest. And Mary Davenport, I can provide more information on her. She has an incredibly fascinating history. She was particularly concerned with empowering women within the church. She was the one who established this organization called the Junior Daughters, which encouraged women to be involved with all aspects of the Episcopal Church. As with the history of many sites, there are a lot of interesting figures involved with this one. One of the questions I had was, well, how did they get the money to buy this site? And Stephanie, as I said, was incredibly generous with her time in letting me go through all the files they have. And I actually found the telegram that was sent from Edwin Gould's staff, in which he said, I'm giving you the money for this land, but I want to remain anonymous. And he was the son of famous financier Gould. And he was very concerned with the care of children, both in New York City and throughout the country. So he was the gentleman who provided the money to purchase the site. And the original interesting person involved was Alexander Graham Bell's father, Professor Alexander Melville Bell, who had a great deal of interest in the treatment of people who had hearing difficulties. And so he was the gentleman who donated the land when they were in Virginia. So it's kind of an interesting collection of people. I'll just touch briefly on Appleton P. Clark. When he died, the obituary talked about him as the Dean of Architects. To me, what's really interesting about Clark is, in addition to designing apartment buildings and commercial buildings, campuses, he had this strong interest, as I mentioned earlier, in the care of children, to the point that he eventually wrote a book about it. And he was the one who realized that safety was important. All of his designs for his buildings, they're fireproof, as they are at the Episcopal Home, but he also wanted to make them healthy. So if you look at the scale, it's not just to make them fit in with the residential neighborhood, but it's also designed to provide light and air. So there are a lot of it, most of the rooms have double exposures. They have a lot of windows and light and air. And then you have an outdoor space, that central quad that links all of them. And one interesting feature you may have seen when you toured the site with Stephanie, there are these underground tunnels. Well, they're primarily underground. They're slightly above ground, just a little bit. They peek out. They connect the three buildings so that the students could walk between all three buildings, in inclement weather, which I thought was kind of an interesting touch. You don't really see that a lot. So here we touch a little bit on Clark's plan. Again, the campus, his original vision was for 5 buildings. Due to funding issues, they were only able to construct the 3 that we all know. The children's building and the infirmary building were never constructed. A later building was designed, the media center building, which is to the north, and is actually quite compatible despite being a non-contributing building. What was really also interesting in going through all the files is Clark was not the type of architect who, there are some architects who just kind of do the broad vision and then they leave all the details to everybody else. He was involved in every detail. And you see this in the files. He picked out paint colors, door hardware, how the fireplace surrounds were going to be designed. He did all the interior drawings. It's really quite remarkable that he cared that much about it, that he got into every little detail. The architecture is very typical of Clark's work. He loved the classical revival styles. There are strong Georgian and colonial influences on this set of buildings. As I mentioned, he wanted to make sure these buildings were safe. So they are all, it's concrete, brick, terracotta on the interiors of the walls, so that they're completely fireproof. And then again, with the floor plans, as you can see on the slide, he was really an expert in laying out buildings, in making them functional and also healthy for the children in terms of cross ventilation. The landscape, again, showing that he was practical as well as someone who looked at all the details. He realized that the organization was probably not going to be able to afford an elaborate landscape plan. So you've probably noticed it does not have, incredibly laid out gardens and plantings, and trees and all that. It's really quite simple, which was in keeping with the plan. The only notable thing that he really wanted to make sure was that that central quad had that wonderful circle of trees. As we all know from living in DC, it can get extremely warm in the summer. And so he wanted to make sure that the children, not just in the summer, much of the year, that the children could use that outdoor space as a central gathering space and have some shade. In terms of the statement of significance, I touched on this before. It's significant under National Register Criterion A, as well as Criterion C. For both under A for history, and under C for the type, and also being the work of the master. And I mentioned before that he had written this wonderful book, which I can actually, I have it digitally, I can send it to you. It's really an interesting read to really see his passion for designing homes that work for children. The period of significance, in the nomination, we proposed 1929 from when the construction was for these three buildings. The DC Historic Preservation Office is recommending a broader period of significance until 1957, which is when it stopped being an orphanage. We think that's very reasonable, so we are in support of that if that's what the HPRB feels is appropriate. I mentioned these funny connections, or ingenious connections, I should say, at the ground levels that link all three of the buildings. Integrity. When the DC Historic Preservation Office and the Historic Preservation Review Board look at a potential landmark or historic district, they want to make sure that it still has integrity. And as I mentioned earlier, these buildings are remarkably intact, both on the exterior and on the interior. There's so many original finishes, particularly as Stephanie knows, I got a little obsessed with the bathrooms that still have all the original tile, as well as the central hallways and the staircases. One other feature that is really remarkable if you visited the site are the lockers that were designed for the children, and Clark himself designed each of those lockers. In terms of the boundary justification, we really took our cue from the National Register guidance on this, where it states that the boundary should be driven by including the significant buildings or features that contribute to the potential landmark. We did talk about this with David Maloney, Kim Williams, and Tim Dene, all from the DC Historic Preservation Office. And we were all in agreement that what is significant about this site are the original buildings by Clark, which on the slide before you are the three buildings with the green dot on them. And then there's the blue building, which is the later non-contributing building, but which is actually quite compatible in terms of massing and material. And then that central quad area is in the middle of all of them. The large area to the side was never really developed by the home or designed by Clark. Tim Dene, the HBO staff reviewer, articulates this better than I can in his staff report. But basically it remained just kind of an undeveloped area. And so the proposed boundary just includes the three buildings, the central quad, and the one non-contributing building. And so just to, kind of wrap it up for you guys, this, I get to work on a lot of interesting projects at Goulston, but this project was one that was just such a pleasure to be involved with. The history of this home, all the people that were involved in it, the current people who are involved with it, the mission that they have had, for over 100 years. And one of the things that really struck me was in 1960, the home had gotten a series of letters from people in the District of Columbia saying that they knew of children that needed the help that the home could provide. And in their 1908 certificate of incorporation, it mentioned that it used white children. It said that in there. And what was interesting to read, it was incredible to read, in all the correspondence that they still have at the home, is these internal discussions within the home where they realized they were not living up to what the mission really should be, to serve all the children of the District of Columbia. And so in 1960, 61 years ago, they changed that and they removed white children from that certificate of incorporation, and were able to serve a much more broader and diverse community in the District of Columbia. And it's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful site. And as Allison said, we really hope you all will support our landmark nomination. And thank you very much. I hope I haven't talked too much.
Okay. Yeah, if you could take the share screen down, Jonathan, so we can see each other, that would be good.
Yeah.
There we go.
Great. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
John and Chris, you want to have any further comments or take questions?
Jonathan, you mentioned Hillcrest. Could you just tell us one or two sentences about that and the significance of the architect connection to the Episcopal Center?
Right. So as I mentioned, Appleton P. Clark really was focused on the design of a number of sites. And Hillcrest is probably one of the most notable of those. I'm sorry, I'm trying to, nice thing. And that one is more, his vision there was, he wanted to design a series of cottages. But again, the idea was around a central green space, which was the same plan that he followed for the Episcopal Home for Children. One of the notable differences for Hillcrest is in the Tudor Revival style, and it has a much more formal landscape. Rose Greeley, who you all have probably heard of, who is a noted, really the first female landscape architect, was involved with the design. So the landscape there is a little bit more elaborate than what we saw at the Episcopal Home for Children. And they both did not see all of Clark's vision realized, but they're both reflective, and that's what Tim Dene notes in his staff report. Hillcrest is a little bit earlier, it's 1926. So it's, I think when I talked with Tim about it, the way he saw it was Clark learned some lessons from Hillcrest, if that makes sense, and then applied those to the Episcopal Home. But it's part of his broader work in these, design of homes for underserved children. And again, building on that national movement, which really had taken hold where people realized that underserved children were not being served, and the types of homes they were being put in were not conducive to learning or to improving just their general well-being.
Chris?
Yeah, Jonathan, I think it's a great presentation. I have my one question is what was your intent on the interiors? Is this?
Sorry, yes. Sorry, Chris, I should have touched on that. Yes, so this is, there are very few interior landmarks in the District of Columbia. To be an interior landmark, you have to meet a certain kind of threshold or rise to a certain level of importance. We are not proposing the interiors to be landmarked on any of these buildings. And the DC, David Maloney and Kim and Tim Dene all agree that they would not support landmarking the interiors.
That's good, because I do think it would severely limit what could be done with the buildings. Although I do agree, there's a lot of great woodwork in there, and there are a number of rooms which I had hoped they preserved, the ones with the fireplaces and the wainscoting and stuff. But Stephanie, I really appreciate you taking John and I around. It was really a lot of fun to go through those three old buildings.
Okay, any other questions? We've got a hand raised from Stephanie. Stephanie, did you want to add anything?
Well, I did just, again, as much as you appreciated being hosted, I appreciated the questions, and there was just such a real, genuine, thoughtful approach to your visit, and I appreciated that from both of you, Commissioner Chris and Commissioner John. I also, just in speaking and listening to Jonathan and remembering something I said, I do think it's important to clarify that while we have the Episcopal in our name, we're not affiliated with the Episcopal Church any longer. There was that period of time where, for management's sake, there was a request for that sort of assistance, but we're not part of the Episcopal Church now, the diocese. And I think that's a bit confusing based on our name. We had an auxiliary board, some of the churches in the area that help support, at holiday time with the children, and they met at our location. But I think it's just important for people to recognize that we're a private single entity. So I just wanted to clarify that in case there were questions in that way. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? I haven't seen anything in the Q&A.
I have a
I think-
question.
Michael has a question.
Oh, Michael, I can't see you, Michael, and you're off my screen. So
Sorry. It's probably better that way for you. Well-being. So thank you for this presentation. And Stephanie, I should say that the center and its mission are something that are dear to me. My daughter taught for 6 years at the Camp Hill School. I'm not sure if you know what the Camp Hill School is. It's the oldest Waldorf school in North America, exclusively serving children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The Camp Hill Association is a global association. She was on the Camp Hill Sultane campus in Pennsylvania, which is a much bigger campus than what you have. They raise their own animals and gardens, but a similar philosophy of well-being. And it was founded around the turn of the 19th century, also as a safe place for children. So I'm very supportive of the mission of the school, and would love to see a way that we can figure out how we can bring back the programming that is now dormant. And as you know, we've spoken to you about the possibility of joining forces with DCPS about this. We're trying to talk to DCPS about joining forces with you. But so this is not specifically related to the historic designation, but maintaining your status as a tax exempt organization, providing services, I think would be helpful. And we'd like to continue to talk about that because maybe there's something that we can do collectively. I know the Murray, I'm a little bit troubled about the Murray lease and the renovations that they're going to do and the 70-car port that they're going to build, and the installation of what is probably artificial turf on the fields, and the movement of the attempted movement of these old growth trees, which in my experience is never successful. They never survive. And that, in terms of your presentation, Jonathan, was sort of central to the design of the plan. So I'm a little bit troubled, not to say I'm voting against by any means the designation, but I'm a little bit concerned about that lease, the renovations, the carport, the artificial turf, but most especially the trees. And I don't know whether there's anything that can be done or undone about that, but it seems to me that takes away from what was central to the design of the school and its layout.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on the Murray lease tonight because, number one, we've got another large topic to discuss tonight. But number two, we're going to have ample opportunity to talk with the people from Murray about this because they will be required to get a BZA exception to have this approved. And so we will have a thorough process with Murray. As I understand it, the lease has already been executed and they're in the process of doing due diligence at this point. And so we will have plenty of opportunity to discuss that with the folks at Murray as well as Stephanie, and we'll hash that out at an appropriate time.
Well,
Chris?
I'm sorry.
Let me answer you, Michael. I got an answer for you. First of all, the historic district doesn't include the field. It just includes the square where the three buildings are, and then there's 12 trees in a circle, which when you look at the aerial looks like a donut, except part of it's gone because one of the trees died. But that's what's included. So the whole field is not part of the historic district presentation at all. So whatever Murray does to the trees and stuff has to go through DC, and DC has very strict rules about taking down mature trees. So, but that's something for the community and for us to work on separate from the historic district.
Well, I was just wondering what their thinking was about that, since they featured it as part of their presentation as central to the design of the structure.
Yeah, they're
Chris.
talking about the ring of trees that's on the historic, that little square. If you look at the presentation.
Yeah.
I think you have
Are
a
any of those
couple.
trees in jeopardy?
None.
No.
Those are all
No.
part of the historic land.
All right, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. It's just the three Clark buildings, the non-contributing building, and it's Commissioner from Baludi, I'm sorry if I got your name wrong, noted the trees around that central quad area.
Okay.
None of those would be impacted.
Okay. Sorry for my confusion.
Okay, Connie?
Hi, I just wanted to thank you so much for this presentation and also really for the tour that Commissioner Gore and I went on with Stephanie Nash. It was very apparent to me, certainly when I walked through the building, the way in which it was designed, when you talked about the light and the airiness and the sort of flow and the care for the children, it really did come across. And so it is a very special place. And I just wanted to make a note of it. Because when you see it from the street, you don't get to see a lot of it because it is purposely hidden and not supposed to be in your face. But when you're inside it, you really do see that there's a lot of love that just comes across from that design. So thank you so much. I really appreciated that tour.
Okay, there are nothing in the Q&A. John?
I could make a resolution related to this.
I would appreciate that.
All right. I resolve that the ANC 34G support the application of the Episcopal Center for Children for approval as a historic landmark in the District of Columbia.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Okay, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor, raise their hand. 7-0. Okay, thank you very much. Allison, Stephanie, and Jonathan, we really appreciate your presentation and we're looking forward
Very much for your
to
time.
Thank you
working
so
with
much, Randy and
ECC a lot.
everyone.
Okay,
Good
thank you.
evening.
All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you for coming.
Good night.
Bye, Allison.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a presentation from DDOT to update us on the Connecticut Avenue reversible lanes operation and safety study. And Commissioner Fromboludi and I are on an advisory group that is trying to assist DDOT in looking at these issues with regard to changing the reversible lanes on Connecticut Avenue. And we've had several meetings with DDOT on this, and they have asked now to come and make a presentation to the commission. Chris, do you want to say anything as by way of introduction? You're muted. You're muted, Chris.
I'd like to hear DDOT first. I think they'll give a fairly long introduction to the process, but I think it's been very interesting and it seems to break down into, there's definitely a very strong bicycle lobby that's involved in these designs. And to me, there's a little bit of a bias toward that. And I will say in advance that I'm worried about the amount of traffic that will spill out into the neighborhood streets if we do go with the scheme that gets rid of 2 lanes of traffic permanently and all the parking and loading. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, Lisa is now in the process of making all of the DDOT people panelists. And I don't know who's going to take the lead. Ed, are you going to take the lead?
Can you hear me, Randy?
Yeah, yes, we can. We can't see you, but we can hear you. Yes, Connie.
Okay.
Connie had something.
Randy, can the person who is owner, can they rename themselves so we know who that person is? Is that the last name or?
I got it.
All right.
Yeah.
I think you can see me, and I can share my screen if you'd like.
Let me make you a co-host then, Ed, so you can do that. Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Let's give it a try. let me know if you can see it.
We can see it, Ed. That's good.
Oh, great.
And just
Okay.
for your planning purposes here, I mean, some of us at least, or the commissioners, are fairly familiar with this, and some of the background material you can go through fairly quickly.
Great.
We'd like to get to the meat of the discussion.
Sure. Thanks, Randy. Well, just first of all, thank you all for having us. I think we last came to you in July when we started conceptualizing the alternatives for Connecticut Avenue. And now since July, we completed some of our traffic analysis and parking and multimodal analysis. And our goal is to try to get to a public meeting. We're aiming for, I think, the 30th of March and the 1st of April. We'll have 2 meetings. Charlotte will tell you a little bit more about that later. But so we are attending a number of ANC and stakeholder meetings this month to get additional feedback that will allow us to finalize our public meeting materials. Anyway, with me tonight is Cynthia Lin, our Deputy Project Manager. We have Michael Glickman from the consulting firm of AMT, and Charlotte Ducksworth and Ian Swain from Community ET, our public involvement consultant. We do have a lot of slides tonight, and we'll definitely try to go by them very quickly, and then we can always go back to try to answer some of your questions in the end. So if that's okay, I'll begin, Randy.
That sounds good. Thanks, Ed.
All right, thank you. And there's always a lag here, so let's see what happens here. All right, so we're going to give you a project overview. I think we may have showed you this slide before, and it just lots of studies for the past 20 years. And we had 3 resolutions from the ANCs back in 2018. And then the community and the ANCs helped us really shape the scope for this current study. The goal of the study is to determine how we can reduce vehicle crashes and improve safety for all modes, and to consider a protected bicycle lane, and to look at the feasibility of removing the reversible lane operations. This is the study area. As you can see in blue is our primary study area with 24 intersections. And our secondary study area is outlined in red. The bounds are Mass Avenue, Western, Broad Branch, Beach, and we go as far south as DuPont Circle. We have 2 slides here that provide you with the status of the project, and in red, you can see that we've completed some detailed traffic operational analysis, multimodal analysis, and safety, and we're heading towards our stakeholder meetings with the aim to get to a public meeting number 1 in the spring. This slide shows you our agency and community engagement strategy. You can see the Community Advisory Committee members. We've met with ANCs, stakeholders, interagency meetings in the District of Columbia. We're having public meetings as well as we have our website. All of these meetings on this slide, as you can see, we've had many meetings with the ANCs and with our stakeholders in the corridor. We've met with the zoo, institutional stakeholders such as Howard University and UDC, and of course the three Main Street organizations with the business folks in the corridor. This slide just shows you some of the issues that we are dealing with. One is the visibility of the reversible lane signage, the difficulty for motorists, and the confusion that some of this causes along the corridor for folks. This is the existing lane usage. We have 60 feet curb to curb width, and one of the principles of the study is to, whatever we do, is to stay within the 60-foot curb to curb width. We went over our safety numbers before. We have about 1,500 police reported crashes during the past 5-year period. This shows you the average daily traffic along Connecticut Avenue and some of the parallel routes. As you can see, we have 30 to 32,000 vehicles per day in the northern part of Connecticut Avenue. We have around 23,000 vehicles per day in the southern portion of Connecticut Avenue. This slide you may not have seen before, and this shows you the origin and destinations of the traffic, the users of Connecticut Avenue. And we cut Connecticut Avenue into 3 different sections. But I think the bottom line here is that you all had some thoughts about through traffic, and you've told us that, and the numbers bear it out, basically, that 40 to 50% of the traffic on Connecticut Avenue is through traffic. And what that means is traffic that neither has origins or destinations along the avenue. Cynthia is going to talk about, in a moment, she's going to talk about the alternatives that we've developed. These are some of our guiding principles. We're looking to accommodate the needs of all people who live and work and recreate within the corridor. We want to provide sustainability, resiliency, and equitable transportation options. Safety and Vision Zero, we want to be able to reduce the number of crashes and fatalities and incorporate complete streets principles to reduce vehicle speeds along the corridor. Traffic operations, we want to mitigate any significant traffic impacts. And then we're concerned about parking, loading, pads, bikes, transit. And again, as I said, we need to be able to stay within that 60-foot curb to curb. Cynthia, would you like to start?
Sure, thanks, Ed. So just kind of as an overview, we have been over the last couple of months working with a number of different build concepts. We started with 4, which we named A, B, C, and DO, and then a base, no build base concept, so 5 in total. And then over the course of several months, we've received some other additional comments and concepts from the public in our community advisory committee, which we've added to this deck. I think as we go through this, you'll see that there are a few alternatives that are rising to the top. And however, we will be bringing all of these to the public for a meeting scheduled in March of 2021. Michael later on will go through some of the evaluation matrix analysis that we've done to show the pros and cons for each of these concepts. And just as a fundamental point, all alternatives are really made to include elements to improve safety and mobility, which is the kind of overall guiding principle of this project as we move forward. Next slide, please. So our first concept that we'll talk about is the no build management option. This one is modeled as our base concept. It's a similar operation to pre-COVID conditions along the corridor, which retains the 2-lane reversible lane system. So 4 lanes outbound, 4 lanes inbound and 2 lanes outbound during the PM, and then the reverse in the PM. And during off-peak periods, there is parking on both sides of the street with 2 travel lanes in each direction. Next slide, please. So this kind of gives you an idea of what's happening pre-COVID, where the AM and PM would have 4 lanes in the inbound or outbound direction, and then during the off-peak, 2 lanes in each direction with off-peak parking on both sides of Connecticut Avenue. And this is just a typical layout that we'll show. Concept A retains the 2-lane reversible lane system. This does require overhead lane use signage and signals. During the peak hour, there would be 3 peak direction travel lanes and 1 off-peak direction travel lane. During the off-peak period, it would be 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes. This does include a protected bike lane on the east and west sides that is buffered. This, however, does require that all parking need to be removed along the corridor. Next slide, please. Concept B removes the reversible lane system. During the peak hour operation, there's 3 northbound lanes and 3 southbound lanes during peak hours. And then during the off-peak periods, it's 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes with parking and loading on both sides of the avenue. There would be no protected bike lanes as part of this concept, and no parking would be removed. As in pre-COVID conditions, parking would not be permitted during peak hours, but off-peak it would be allowed. Next slide. And this just shows you a typical layout of what that might look like along the corridor with off-peak parking on both sides with 2 travel lanes, and during peak hour, no parking along the corridor. Next slide. Concept C removes the reversible lane system entirely. During the peak and off-peak periods, it'd be 2 northbound and 2 southbound travel lanes. The cross-section would allow for some dedicated turn pockets at specific intersections. This does provide a 1-way protected bike lane that's buffered on both sides of the street. In running our traffic operation analysis, we Notice that there are generally manageable impacts in terms of operations. However, in terms of parking, it does remove around 500 spaces along the corridor. However, there's around 120 spaces that are retained in the commercial areas, which we can get into a little bit more detail later on. But this does show a cross section at different points, just to give you an idea of what that might look like. So on the left, that's our standard cross section of 2 lanes in each direction with a buffered bike lane. As you move toward the intersection with the middle cross section, the buffered bike lane is skinnied up a little bit to allow for a turn pocket, a dedicated left turn pocket. And then further down on the right, where there is a commercial center, that's how we are designing for a parking lane or loading lane on the east side of Connecticut Avenue, which does still provide a protected facility. Next slide. Similarly as to before, this is just showing what we're calling a gazikla. So the bus floating island would help protect against any bus bike conflicts that are happening along the corridor. And then the drawing on the illustration on the right is showing the left turn pocket that would be necessary at some locations such as Porter and Connecticut Avenue. Next slide. Similarly as before, this is just showing another concept where parking would be provided on most likely the eastern side of the corridor, and where the bike lane would be skinnied up a little bit. Next slide.
Cynthia,
Yes.
are you going to go over these slides in a little bit more detail, or is this the only option to ask questions?
Nope, I think at the end we can come back to these. I'm just trying to get through them as quick as possible because there are other conversations to be had. But yeah. This concept DO is what we're calling where we retain one reversible lane system. And with this concept, there is 3 peak direction, 2 off-peak direction travel lanes. This does provide a protected cycle track, 2-way cycle track on the western side of Connecticut Avenue. However, noting that this does create some conflicts where we may need to, we definitely need to be providing left turn pockets that are protected only due to our bicycle facility design guidelines to prevent conflicts between vehicles and bikes, as well as potential pedestrian conflicts that are for people walking into the cycle track. Next slide. This concept DO is looking at also D1 retains the reversible lane system. For traffic operations all day, this does have 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes. There are some options to provide a northbound parking / loading lane or left turn pocket at some intersections. Similar to the other DO concept, this does provide a 2-way protected cycle track on the western side of the corridor. And similar to before, we do need to provide protected left turns to prevent conflicts between bikes and cars along the 2-way cycle track. D2 also removes a reversible lane system. However, this concept provides 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes, as well as a 2-way center left turn lane that is consistent along the corridor. During the off-peak period, it'd be 1 northbound lane and 2 southbound lanes with the center turn lane still there with a northbound and southbound, with the northbound parking and loading lane. And again, this does provide a 2-way protected cycle track on the western side of the corridor. And then the last concept that we'll talk about is concept E. This also removes the reversible lane system. It does provide 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes, parking on both sides, and a 2-way protected cycle track. However, the main flaw with this concept is that it does require constructing a facility outside of the 60-foot right-of-way, which does not conform to our guiding principle for this project. And there are some conflicts that might arise with having to retouch parts of the corridor that are part of other DDOT projects, such as the Cleveland Park Streetscape project design. So that's something that we are considering. This is just a map of ongoing and recent improvements that are part of both the Cleveland Park Streetscape and drainage design project, as well as other signal optimization projects that we'll be incorporating into our design alternatives moving forward. Next slide, please. We've also identified a number of opportunities to append safety and mobility elements to different concepts. So some of these will be added to all concepts. Some are more specific to specific concepts. These will be fleshed out in more detail as we move toward 10% design, but these are some of the elements that we could be adding, such as speed reduction, speed limit reductions, realigning some approaches, hawk signals, etc. So kind of our preliminary findings as we're going through this alternative analysis is that it's generally pretty difficult to meet the full purpose and need as we've defined by the study. There are a number of trade-offs between parking, between loading and accommodating bike facilities, and as well as other goals such as, the safety of removing the reversible lane system. So those are things that we'll consider as we talk to the public this spring. We still will be moving forward with the no build management option, although it doesn't meet the purpose and need of the project essentially. However, it does provide the baseline concept for us to be comparing and contrasting alternatives as we move forward. So, and then Al, turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Cynthia. Very quickly, we conducted an alternatives evaluation. We did a number of screenings. We applied a rating system, and we did evaluate safety and operations and ped and bike and transit and parking and constructability. And embedded in all of the evaluation criteria is looking at the district plans, including Move DC, the Bicycle Master Plan, Vision Zero, our sustainability DC 2.0 plan, our carbon neutrality goals, and the Bike and Ped Safety Amendment Act of 2016. So all of these are kind of embedded in our evaluation criteria. And you can see we developed a matrix, and we just applied a -2 to +2 range. And really what we found is two concepts appear to have surfaced to, actually they appear to be equal. They're rising to the top, and the others have constraints that we think may not be suitable to go forward with. But the two concepts that appear to be rising to the top, that's concept B and C. Alternative B, some of the safety benefits of alternative B, it does remove the reversible lanes. We think we estimate about 36% reduction of crashes during the peak hours and about 17% of crashes overall in terms of the whole day. We also apply left turning. We can apply left turn calming treatments, and that would slow left turning vehicles and help reduce conflicts with pedestrians. As you can see, we have a safety toolbox for alternate C, and we have a number of CRF is a crash reduction factor. So you can see if we put pedestrian refuge islands in a number of locations, we can reduce crashes by about 26%. If we can put a left turn lane on a major approach, we can reduce crashes by about 27% and on. If we restrict parking at some of the corners, we can help reduce crashes by about 20%. All of these are not additive, but they give you a range of the possibilities of what some of these factors and what some of these tools can help in terms of safety. Again, the same as alternative B, we would, if we get rid of the reversible lane, we would have about a 17% overall reduction in crashes. If we add protected bicycle lanes, we would expect to see a decrease in vehicle crashes and protecting cyclists at mid-block locations. We would add turn lanes at selected intersections. Again, that would give us over 20% reduction of crashes with intersections with turn lanes. And again, removing parking and adding a refuge island, as you can see, potential crash reductions. This gives you a summary of the total available spaces by segment along Connecticut Avenue. You can see we segmented Connecticut Avenue into 10 parts. There's over 600 spaces in the corridor. And as you can see, concept A would take all the parking. Concept B would not take any parking. Concept C with a protected bicycle lane takes about 500 spaces. One of the things with concept C, as you saw in the diagrams, is that we would retain, we say we would gain parking spaces, meaning we would be able to have a lane of parking that would be available, parking and loading that would be available all day long, as opposed to just in certain hours. Michael, let's see, 43 here. I'm looking at my cheat sheet here. I'm going to go a little bit further and then hand this off to Michael Glickman. Our traffic analysis focuses on concept B and C because the model itself is sensitive to the changes in the number of lanes. So for the no build, we have no change in the number of lanes on Connecticut Avenue. For concept B, we eliminate one lane during the peak hour and peak direction. And in concept C, we reduce 2 lanes in the peak hour, peak direction. And to let everyone know, we're not looking at traffic this year or next year. We're looking at traffic on a 25-year horizon. So we're really looking at a build out condition of the avenue. And all of our traffic volume forecasts are consistent with the land use and employment and population estimates with the District of Columbia and the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. We estimated traffic diversions, we conducted a capacity analysis, and then we also looked at the relative travel time differences between concepts. Again, a lot of questions have come up, well, what about the pandemic? And the study does not account for changes on a year-to-year basis for the vagaries of traffic that goes from month to month or year to year. We're really looking at a long-term view of what the avenue might look like, in 20, 25 years. What this shows you is a set of forecasts, existing conditions, no build, meaning if we did nothing in the corridor in 25 years, and then a build condition for concept B and a build condition for concept C. And let's just take one segment, and I'll walk you through some of these numbers. So if we look at Albemarle Street to Porter Street, for example, today we have almost 32,000 cars a day. If we did nothing in the no build condition, we would have 34,500. If we implemented concept B, we would have a reduction and we would go to about 32,500. And then we would have a further reduction in concept C of around 28,000. And that you'll see is mainly due to the diversion of cars in Connecticut Avenue, along Connecticut Avenue, to other parts of the corridor. This gives you the order of magnitude. Connecticut Avenue really is a multimodal corridor. And it gives you a sense, these numbers give you a sense of at least cars and buses and metro rail and bicycles, what we have today and what we might have in the future for some of these. It's not apples to apples, but it just gives you a relative sense. You can see that, roughly, 20 to 30,000 cars a day, no matter today or in the future along Connecticut Avenue. We have around 4,300 folks a day that use the bus. And in terms of the metro rail stations, you can see Woodley Park has around 6,000, Cleveland Park around 3,700, Van Ness around 5,700. And this is entries per day. And in terms of the bicycle forecast, we have roughly 30 to 90 bicycles a day in the peak hour along Connecticut Avenue. We would forecast around 500 with a protected bicycle lane, around 500 bicycles in the peak hour, and on a daily basis around 3,200 bikes per day if we had a protected bicycle facility. This just gives you the methodology for the bicycle forecast, and I won't spend time on these forecasts or on these slides. And again, this is the same information that I just presented to you in the multimodal slide. Okay, Michael, you're up. You're going to talk about traffic diversion and level of service.
Yes, I am. Thanks, Ed. As Ed indicated, we develop daily weekday traffic diversions for concepts B and C based on the 2045 no build volumes developed for the study area. A portion of the diversions will occur within the secondary study area corridors, and others would route using regional facilities. Those are roadways beyond the primary and secondary corridors. These daily diversions that were then distributed over a 5-hour period. You have really a period in the morning, that before and after that highest peak hour, and then again in the afternoon. And these diversions aren't not expected to occur in the remaining 14 hours of the day. Next slide. And what we determined was that between 55 and 60% of the diversions will occur within the secondary study area, and 40 to 45% will occur along regional roadways such as Georgia Avenue, Clara Barton Parkway, Canal Road, I-495, MacArthur Boulevard, and GW Parkway. So under concept B, the 30,160 daily diversions, 1,920 would divert to the secondary study area, and 1,240 would divert to those regional roadways. For concept C, it's the 7,000-ish daily diversions. Approximately 4,000 would divert to the secondary study area, and then the remaining would go to the regional, utilize regional roadways. Next slide. So these two figures are meant to just graphically represent diversions within the primary and secondary study areas for concepts B and C. The green represents decreases in peak hour volumes, and the blue represents increases in peak hour volumes. And then those lines are weighted based on the relative impact on those roadways. So the proportional or the percentage increase of the no build volume on those roads. And then finally, if you look at the arrows, you have the numbers and the arrows, those represent the peak hour directional volume along those roadways. So again, you'll see a decrease along Connecticut Avenue, and then you'll see an increase along the secondary corridors primarily along the north-south roadways. And you can see that concept C, the diversions probably better represents that what roadways are kind of the key roadways that are the traffic is being diverted to, and you can tell by the weight of those shown on those roadways that they're carrying the bulk of that diversion. Next slide. So the purpose of this flow chart is to show, kind of take you from daily diversion into the AM and PM peak hour diversion. So the white letters represent the concept B. If you start from left to right, at the total daily, the 3160, as I referenced earlier, is the concept B daily diversion, and then in blue, that is concept C. And then, so you can see again how it talked about that split between the secondary study area and the regional roadways in the next two boxes, and then it goes. So then those daily numbers are then converted into a peak hour total diversion, and then that's distributed amongst those four. Well, these are the four key roadways: Massachusetts Avenue, Wisconsin, Reno, and Broad Branch. And so you can see that the 3,160 daily vehicles for concept B equates to 100 vehicles during the highest peak hour along Wisconsin Avenue. And again, as I said earlier, that ADT is distributed over 5 hours of the day. So you would expect that 100 vehicles, there would be something less as it approaches the highest peak hour. And then as it heads towards the end of the peak hour, that volume would decrease. We're now going to get into our analysis, which really is focused on levels of service and delay. For those that don't know, levels of service is a correlation between delay, and then it correlates directly to delay, and it's basically a grading system of that. So anything under 55 seconds is considered acceptable. That's level of service D. When you start seeing delay of greater than 55 seconds, at E or F, it's constrained conditions, and of course it can there is no grade higher than F, so anything over 80 seconds is considered F. And again, this is just for 1 hour. This represents the highest hour in the morning and the highest hour in the evening. And then the hours in between the level of service and operations would be improved. Next slide. So before I talk about the results that are shown on this slide, this is basically the results of our analysis on an intersection, overall intersection level of service basis. But I'm going to start just to walk you through the figures so you can see what you're looking at. The three boxes with an arrow, those are pointing to a study area intersection. The box on the left represents the no build condition. The box in the middle is concept B, and the box on the right is concept C. When you see a green box filled in green, it means that for that particular scenario, it's a level of service D or better. If it's yellow, it's the level of service E. And if it's red, it's level of service F. Those locations where you just see a green box on the intersection itself, it just means that's a study area intersection and the level of service is D or better through all conditions evaluated. So we're going to start with the AM peak hour levels of service for the primary study area. And the primary study area is Connecticut Avenue. It's represented by that dashed box. The intersection really to note during the morning peak hours, Nebraska and Connecticut Avenue. That intersection operates at level of service F during no build B and C. A couple other intersections will have, some will get better, some will get slightly worse, go from D to E. You can see at Calvert, it's level of service E through all conditions. Next slide. Now we're going to look at the AM peak hour, but outside of that boxed area, which is our secondary study area. The intersections that maintain level of service F through all conditions include Nebraska and Broad Branch, and Beach Drive and Tilden Street. You also, if you look at the intersection of Massachusetts and Nebraska or Ward Circle, the intersection goes from level of service E to level of service F under concept C. Next slide. Now we'll focus on the PM peak hour of the primary study area. Again, that's the area inside the box. The intersection of Nebraska and Connecticut Avenue, as I'm sure everyone's aware, is continuing to operate at F through all conditions. The intersection of at Cathedral actually improves to level of service E under concept C, and that's due to the diversions, particularly that left turn and in the westbound right turn. If you can go to the secondary study area now. This is the PM peak hour for the secondary study area. Again, that's the area outside of that dashed box. You see three locations that have level of service F through no build, concept B and concept C. That includes Western Avenue and River Road, Reno Road and Military Road, and Nebraska Avenue and Ward Circle. All of their intersections vary from level of service D to E, and sometimes the scenario will slightly increase delay, and sometimes it'll slightly decrease delay, but those indicate generally manageable conditions. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Michael. Let me go over next steps for a moment, and then we can open it up to some comments and questions. What we're doing now is presenting our major findings of the traffic analysis to our stakeholder and our interagency groups this month. We're starting to prepare for the logistics activities to have a public meeting at the end of March. We're going to hold that public meeting. After the public meeting, we'll take 6 to 8 weeks or so and collate your comments, and we will be developing a recommendation to move forward on a preferred concept. Once we have a preferred concept, we would look at a conceptual or 10% design of that preferred concept, and then prepare a set of environmental documentation. Again, our contact information is here, and we have our project website. And I think thank you all for listening to us. I know it was very quickly, but we'll be glad to try to get into a little bit more detail with you as you have your comments and questions. And again, I think Randy and Chris, I think you have our presentation, so you can put that on your website and distribute that to the folks that that want to see it.
And I had one question about the presentation. It looks, at least the pagination is a little bit different than the one you sent us this afternoon. Like there was a couple of slides added or something. Could you just make sure you get us this presentation? Because I do think there were a few little differences.
Okay, we sure will. Okay.
Chris and I think are going to ask questions first among the commissioners, and then we'll go to the other commissioners. And because I can't see the commissioners on the screen, if you'd raise your hand, I'll recognize you. But I just had a couple of questions, and if you go to slide 56, if you could, I think that's the right one. Yes. And it also applies, I think, to probably slide 58 as well, but we can just do it with this one. The Nebraska and Connecticut Avenue intersection operates at an F condition under any of the alternatives. But are there differences between the alternatives? For instance, I mean, F, as you said, is the highest category of delay, and you can't get any higher than that, but it's at 80 seconds per vehicle delay. When we go to B and C, are we seeing something like 120, 180? How bad does it get, in other words?
Sure. We have prepared, I think we gave you additional information as a CAC member, and we're happy to provide that to you when we finalize the draft of what we call the briefing reports, if you remember. And in those briefing reports, we actually had a much more detailed matrix. And what that matrix has is it grades not only the whole intersection, but it grades every movement of the intersection. And we also showed the delay so that you may see 85 seconds or 120 seconds or 97 seconds. So we provided that to the CAC members, and we'll be glad to provide that to you again. Again, it's a bit more, too much detail for this type of meeting, but anyone that wants to see it, we're welcome to provide those charts. Again, we not only grade the intersection as a whole, but we grade each movement as well.
And is it accurate to say then that the delays for the B or C alternatives would be greater than the no build or alternative?
I can answer that for you, Randy, because I have the numbers right here.
Okay.
Nebraska Avenue inbound in the AM rush hour goes up to 261 seconds, like 2.5 times what it was today. And that is a hideous backup right now. And going the other way, outbound in PM, it goes to 274 seconds. I mean, that's almost 5 minutes for waiting at one intersection. So that's totally unacceptable. That's in my district. And you know, those cars will be backed up past Military Road. They'll back up all the way into our commercial district from that one intersection. So just my 2 cents.
Okay, Chris, you want to go ahead and ask your questions? I'm going to limit my questions and get to the other commissioners.
Okay, I just want to pile on this intersection analysis. Somehow it just seems flawed to me. I mean, a lot of these intersections show concept C with a much smoother traffic flow, and I guess you sort of answered it by saying you think all the cars are going to be diverted other places. But you know, we have a lot of very bad intersections in our area, and the ones off and on Connecticut Avenue, and most of them seem to be getting significantly worse with concept C. And you know, this kind of reminds me of the Military Road fiasco. I don't know if you remember that, Ed. It was about 10 years ago, and when they decided to make Military Road one lane each direction with a turn lane and a parking lane. You know, that's that section 4 lanes from Nebraska to the park, and it it was such a disaster that within a month they had to redo it because it was a mess. The other thing that bothers me about especially concepts C, which is the one with the bike lanes, is getting rid of 500 parking and loading spaces. It's a lot of spaces just to say, oh, you're going to have to park somewhere else. There's approximately 100 of those spaces that are in my district, which runs from approximately Military Road to Nebraska on both sides of Connecticut Avenue. Parking's pretty tight right now, and in the area, especially on the east side of Connecticut Avenue. And then if all of a sudden 100 cars can't park anytime, and especially overnight, it's gonna make the parking situation much worse. So, I think we find that unacceptable. I guess that's the main things. And the only other thing I do want to mention is the forecasts show that Connecticut Avenue is going to have about 3,200 bicyclists. So that's the weekly. I think that's the daily. That's the daily trip number of trips. 3,200 people will use bikes, and about 32,000 people will be using cars. So that's 10 times as many cars as bikes. But the bikes get almost 8% of the roadway, and the cars, which have 10%, 10 times more people, don't get 10 times as much of the roadway. So it just doesn't seem right as far as its percentage of the road being used by the different groups.
Peter?
This is a confusion for a newcomer to this ANC, but I noticed that all of this planning ends at Legation Street. And I have two questions. One is that tenable? I mean, isn't it going to creep to the circle? And two, and this is related, if it isn't, then what people come around the circle, commuters come around the circle, and what they have reversible lanes for 8 blocks or something. How's that gonna, how's my district, I mean the western side of Connecticut, the commercial corridor, how's that going to work with the rest of this, whether it's B or C?
Let me try to answer that for you, Peter. The study was conceived with substantially looking at the reversible lanes only. We are including that multimodal bicycle component, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. But we are looking really at the reversible lanes, which started at Legation and end at Calvert. In concept B, we would basically look at 3 lanes in each direction. If we looked at a bicycle concept, the ones that have a protected bicycle facility, we've been asked to look at perhaps going up to the circle or maybe up to Northampton Street. But we would only look at that in the event that we consider alternative C or another alternative that includes a protected bicycle lane.
Okay, just I don't want to eat up time because I know we're running through time, but just so to understand that correctly, your parking space losses then don't include any parking space losses in our commercial district because that wasn't part of the study.
That's right. Our primary study area goes from Legation Street south to Calvert. That's correct.
Yeah, but if you had bike lanes going all the way up to Northampton, you'd have to get
Then
parking.
Then we would actually expand our study area and look at the impacts if we would go north of Legation to the circle. But at this point in the study, we're not.
Well, let me just say, just to finish up, I mean, I don't understand how we can approve skip parking elsewhere. We can approve the loss of parking in a commercial district that is already hurting because of COVID and was hurting before COVID. So I have a real problem with that.
Okay, I can't see who's got their hands
I
up
have
now.
my hand up, Randy.
Lisa, okay, Lisa, go ahead.
Just a couple of things. One, this is a lot of information for, I think, the new commission. I think you and Chris are coming from a point of advantage. For one, I would like to see all the information that's been shared with the CAC, because I think there's a lot of points of information here that are missing. So I would like to see those documents. And two, isn't this to kind of get us in compliance with Vision Zero and to make our streets safer, pedestrian traffic safer, bicyclist traffic safer? Isn't that where we are trying to go with this project?
That is one of our purpose, in terms of the purpose of need, that's one aspect of the purpose of need. So reducing crashes, Vision Zero, one, and basically including multimodalism is a second. And as we said, we might not be able to do all of it. And that's why we're asking for your vision of what you see Connecticut Avenue, in the future. We're just putting all of our cards on the table, and we're asking you to help us with that, to make those decisions.
Well, I think that's a very important aspect of this discussion, and probably a discussion that the ANC needs to have on a broader level. For one, I would like to see the ANC and this district go to that. And I think that's where we eventually want to be. So Chris, when you talk about, the vehicles having a certain percentage of space that's proportionate to what bicyclists have, I kind of see the vision as, encouraging more bicycle use. So I think we probably have some, differences there that we need to really hash out on this. And it definitely warrants a broader discussion. I don't think this one-day discussion at this meeting is going to suffice.
Yeah, we've been at this for a year, as you may know, and there's a whole lot of information, and a lot of our information is on the project website in terms of what the CAC has seen over the past year, the minutes, as well as their presentation. So you're welcome. We can help you get to that website, and you can look at those materials.
Okay, I can get there. And Randy, what is the ultimate goal for the ANC? Are we going to at some point endorse an option? What is the end goal?
We will consider whatever recommendation DDOT ultimately makes, and we will make comments on it. Whenever there's an opportunity for a comment period, which there are going to be several, we can weigh in at that point. There are 2 public meetings scheduled, and we can weigh in at those. So there are plenty of opportunities for us to weigh in. At this point, as Ed has indicated, there's not been a decision made about what they're going to recommend. They've narrowed it down to 2 alternatives that they prefer now, but there's not been a decision. And so before there is a final decision, we will have an opportunity to weigh in.
Right. And I would hope that you all would provide us comments, after the public meeting. We can assess those comments before we then present a recommendation to our senior management. So, right after that public meeting, we have a process where you can help provide comments, not a formal resolution, but provide us with some comments. And then after we make a recommendation, as Randy said, you can weigh in on the alternative that you think best fits the vision for your ANC.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Okay,
Connie and Chris.
Connie?
Yes, okay, thank you so much. I appreciate this presentation. It's extremely dense. It's difficult, I think, for the attendees to see, but it's clear that a lot of work has been done since last year, and that work is very appreciated. I have a few suggestions on the kind of analysis that I would like to see, and then I have a few points I'd like to make. So number one is, it would be really great if there were like a sensitivity analysis of commuting traffic, where you can say, because it's COVID, it's going to be 10% less, and then you look at what that effect will be across the alternatives. That would be very good to have. The second thing I would like is, you have that matrix, and I found it very difficult to go from a slide that says 3 up, 3 south, then 2, and so forth, and to a matrix that has like, here's some environmental benefits and here's some other parking benefits. I would prefer to have the elements state exactly that on a matrix, which is you have 3 lanes, you have 2 lanes, you have a dedicated, a protected bike lane and so forth, and then to cut across all of those options so that we can see. That would be easier, I think, than the slides. When Cynthia was reading it, you know, it was difficult for me to follow.
Yeah.
And so that would be really good to have. The other thing I think that was not that clear is with regard to traffic diversion to streets versus region. And I think that, and I know your map shows it, but I think it is important to understand if we were to accommodate, and we want to. I mean, these goals that the mayor has, that the city has, the district has, are important goals for us. I think, you know, I would like to have, you know, cleaner air. I would like to be able to have people be able to bike safely. I would like for vehicles, drivers like myself, when I used to commute, not to feel like I'm going to hit, you know, hit a cyclist. That's just no good. But I do think that it would be very important to know how much of that traffic will be diverted if you put bicycle lanes on Connecticut versus, and here's what I wanted to ask you if you've thought of, versus putting bicycle lanes on the streets in parallel to Connecticut and then bring the cyclist back to Connecticut. So I offer, for example, my street. I live in Nevada. And Nevada is not a very wide street, and there are a lot of parents and students who, you know, walk to Lafayette and they go to Blessed Sacrament and so forth. But if we start getting really crowded on Connecticut, even though your study ends at Legation, as Peter mentioned, I just don't see, you know, the traffic is going to go, you know, from north to south. They're going to go away from the circle. They're not going to go onto Connecticut, and it's going to go off to Broad Branch Road where Lafayette is, and it's going to go to Nevada. And I would prefer not to have vehicles go in that direction. So my preference would be if we could arrange it at any, I mean, I have to talk to the residents of Nevada, obviously, and so forth, but I would prefer if we had bike lanes there. There are already bike lanes, you know, and people do like to go from Rock Creek Park straight up Nevada. If there were a way to do that so that we preserve we provide a protected space for cyclists, but we allow them to get right back onto Connecticut, if that's possible. Now, Nebraska is a little scary to me in terms of the loss of service and the delays. But if there were a way for that lane to go all the way past Nebraska toward Rock Creek Park, but then to the right and get back onto Connecticut, that would be really great. So I'd like for that consideration to be made. I don't know if that's ever been discussed, but I certainly fear having more vehicles, you know, speeding through down Nevada or down Broad Branch Road, you know, to get back on Connecticut.
Okay, Michael, I don't see your hand up, but I think you wanted to speak. We're going to go to Michael, then to Chris, and then to Lisa.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go to the attendees. We've got 2 people who've raised their hands among the attendees.
Thank you, Randy. I don't know how to raise my hand electronically. All I know how to do it is manually. So someone can teach me that. I'll try to move into the next century. A couple of quick things. First, overarchingly, I support Proposition Concept C. I think that that's the future of urban transportation. Less cars, the more alternative transportation opportunities that are safe, the better. I think that there's a lot of interesting studies out there about how bicycles and other means of traffic that are not vehicular actually are additive to commercial centers, that people do shop more when they just get off their bikes. I think that we can find alternative parking if we put our minds to it. There are a lot of, like in our area, though it's not exactly part of the survey yet, but it will become part of the survey, I expect, when you go from Livingston up to the Circle. There are a lot of banks and facilities that have unused parking lots that could perhaps be alternatives to on-street parking? I know in New York, people are worried, Peter, for example, about being able to park overnight. In New York, for example, there are parking restrictions that allow for people to park overnight. They just have to move their cars by a certain time in the morning. I mean, so there are opportunities if we want to be creative about this. Similarly, I've been in cities where there's a fear of diversion from commercial streets onto side streets. There's signage. It says no through traffic during rush hour. And they just prohibit cars from going down streets like Broad Branch or Nevada during rush hour. They just keep them on the main street. And I don't know why that can't be done and make Connie Street safer and Broad Branch less traveled with just some signage. But overarchingly, I think that it's time to move to safe streets for bicyclists and non-vehicular means of transportation. The only thing, Ed, that surprises me a little bit is I remember looking at these options early on, and I was always wondering why during rush hour there wasn't a dedicated bus lane, so that you could, if you expanded the number of L buses on Connecticut Avenue, the volume of buses, and you created, sort of a bus lane, why that couldn't also facilitate transportation down the avenue. And the last question, I guess, is, have we done an analysis? Have you guys done an analysis to ask how many of these cars that are traveling down Connecticut Avenue are Maryland cars just traveling through downtown versus, sort of District of Columbia centric traffic? I mean, because it's a funny thing to build a transportation system that is calculated to make commuting from Maryland through our district down to working downtown and then zooming back up through the district back to Maryland with little benefit to DC, commercially, pedestrian safety, or otherwise.
Sure. Michael, and everyone, can you see the screen here? Origin and destination?
Yes.
Okay, I think that kind of gets at your question, Michael. I think what this shows is that 40 to 50% of the folks on Connecticut Avenue are through traffic. And as I said earlier, through traffic is people that have neither origins or destinations in your study area.
Sorry, I see
area.
that now. It was going too fast for me. My slow moving brain to focus on.
No, we went really quickly. And I think this was actually what we call big data. This is basically data from people's cell phones that were aggregated. And so this is a survey that was done pre-COVID. And as you can see, roughly, 50% of the people are belong on Connecticut Avenue. They live and they work and they recreate there. And then the others basically are, I don't want to call them commuters, but they are folks that travel from outside of the district, outside of the Connecticut Avenue corridor to points, downtown and beyond, Virginia, wherever. So this gives you a sense of people that are that living and working in the corridor versus people that are using Connecticut Avenue to get from one part of the region to the other.
Yeah, and it's as to those people. I don't mean to be. It's xenophobic is the right word for for a person who's trying to protect the interests of the residents of the District of Columbia. I'm not as concerned about people through traffic, sitting at a traffic light for a few extra minutes. Maybe if they had to sit there for 5 or 6 extra minutes, they'd take public transportation and we'd have less of those cars on our road to begin with.
Yeah.
Maybe the less convenient we make their travel, the more alternative travel modes they choose.
Yeah, and I would say that our models are not, there are limitations in our modeling. And one of the limitations is the models are not very good at predicting, or we don't have a model that looks at modal change. So, for example, if we get congestion on Connecticut Avenue, the theory is that people would look to other modes if there was substantial congestion, and our model just doesn't give us that information. So we do believe that modal change would happen, but we don't have the data to show that right now.
Okay,
Hey,
well,
Chris?
you can see it in other cities. You can
Yeah.
see it in cities that are more bicycle friendly, that is in fact what's going on.
And then to answer your other question very quickly about bus lanes, we did look at potential alternatives with bus lanes early in the study. We met with our transit delivery division and we met with WMATA, and they feel like since the metro is along the corridor and there are other, so we have bus priorities in the city. They feel like the Connecticut Avenue corridor is, we would be duplicating service if we provided for bus priority lanes and dedicated transit lanes. So that's what we heard from our transit folks.
Okay, Chris?
Yes, I'm not going to dwell on this too long. I think it would be great if DDOT kind of got out of the box a little bit on this. I mean, I'm kind of with Connie. There are a lot of routes that parallel Connecticut Avenue. On my side, 39th Street's one of them. Direct shot from Western all the way to Fessenden, and then you can cut through the high school area on a nice path and connect again and go down 38th. You can get downtown very quickly that way. And if they provided some kind of priority for bicycles on those streets, you might find another way to get bikes, much more pleasant than going down Connecticut Avenue toward downtown. The other opportunity, which I thought was a big miss on DDOT, was Broad Branch Road. There you have a wonderful way to get to Rock Creek Park, the bike trail there, and that takes you right downtown, takes you to Georgetown, and they won't put a bike path on Broad Branch Road. Instead, they're going to spend tons of money for an elevated pedestrian walkway, which no one's ever going to use because that's not where pedestrians want to walk. You could make Broad Branch Road maybe one way for cars, and you could have a nice big bike lane, two-way bike lane on that street. Which, why don't you, why does it have to be Connecticut Avenue? And then the last one is the sidewalk, the pedestrian sidewalk on Connecticut Avenue between Military and Nebraska is 12 feet wide. Why couldn't 6 feet of that be a bike lane and 6 feet for people? And then you can have the parking and the cars on Connecticut Avenue and the bikes. I mean, you'd have to look at each block and maybe you'd even have to take some private property away from some of these buildings, big front lawns, to make the sidewalks a little wider. I mean, you got to, because I think if you confine yourself to 60 feet, there's no really good solution. You're just getting a bunch of bad solutions. Like the bike lane is so skinny. It's actually, I looked up the federal requirements for bike lanes. 4-foot bike lane is below the federal requirement. If you get a curb, it's supposed to be 5 feet. So, I mean, I don't think any of these solutions are really ideal solutions.
Lisa?
I won't belabor my point either, because I know we want the community to speak. But, just to kind of piggyback off of Chris and Connie's comment, about diverting bike traffic off of Connecticut Avenue. Chris, she said, why would we choose Connecticut Avenue? I would say, why wouldn't we? Bikers are people that participate in the commerce of the government. So why would we want to divert potential customers and people that will visit our business districts to a side street? I mean, biking is not just about a pleasure ride. They're consumers as well, and we want them to consume on that business district. So I think the business district wants customers, whether they're on a bike or on in a car. They want customers. And I don't want to advocate for taking customers away from that business district. So, bikers obviously are trying to get from one mode, or one place to another place as quickly and as safely as possible, but they're also consumers.
Okay, you're breaking up a bit there at the end, but I think we got it. Okay, we're going to go to attendees, and the first one who has raised his hand is James Harnett. Lisa, could you elevate James so that he could speak?
Yes.
And Josh Rising is right after him if you want to
Yep.
do that too.
Okay. I can't tell. There you are. James, go on.
Hi, commissioners. Well, thanks for putting on this meeting. I really appreciate DDOT being here and you all having this opportunity to ask questions and to review this information before the public meeting later this spring. I live in Foggy Bottom and recently finished up an internship on Connecticut Avenue and regularly commuted up this way to get to my job before COVID. And one of the big challenges that I found and that are the offices in this area and the businesses I know in the area suffered from is that it really is a very unsafe road for cyclists. If you look back to the DC Bicycle Master Plan in 2005, Connecticut Avenue was included as a planned route for a protected cycle infrastructure. And I think that it's long past time for DDOT and for this community and for every neighborhood across the district to fulfill its need to keep cyclists safe. I used to be an ANC commissioner in Foggy Bottom, and I pushed for protected bike lanes because we had students and residents who were hit by bikes, hit by cars. And what we really needed is dedicated space for pedestrians and for cyclists and for drivers to stay safe in their respective lanes. Nobody is made safer by us deciding to put more cyclists on the sidewalk or more scooters on the sidewalk. And it certainly doesn't keep pedestrians safe, but it also doesn't keep folks that are looking to other forms of micromobility safe. And the only way that we solve this issue is if we recognize that our roads are way too dangerous today. And they're designed for people that are cruising around the neighborhood in, a 1-ton, brick that will keep them safe, but doesn't keep cyclists and people that, might only have a helmet safe. And I think that it's really important that we do all we can as commissioners and as a community and as a city to recognize that cyclists and pedestrians are the most vulnerable users of our roadway. And we need to do all we can to support both of those groups of people. And I think that, even with option C, more than half of the roadway is still going to be dedicated to vehicle lanes. I wish we could see protected or dedicated bus lanes, because I think that is a priority that would help speed things along all day, but especially during the rush hour. And so I'd encourage this commission to support option C, and I would encourage DDOT to do the same as they look towards advancing one of these designs to 30%.
James, are you still a commissioner?
I finished my term in early January, but I was commissioner for about 2.5 years. I represented George Washington University, and so I just graduated last month and moved off of campus, but I'm sticking around in the neighborhood and still want to stay engaged on all of the priorities that made my involvement in this community and in the communities around our district so integral to my growth and development. And I know that certainly many young people and many folks that depend on environments that are supportive for people that don't drive cars, which is now more than 70% of the new residents that move to the district, that we really need to physically change our infrastructure to make sure that those people feel safe and that they feel like they can use their bike to get to a cafe or to go and buy a book at a nearby bookstore, do the sort of business and transportation movement that we expect to see in a city the size of DC.
Thanks, James. We appreciate all you've done as a commissioner and now as a resident. Thank you. Okay, Josh Rising is next.
Randy, is it possible to stop screen sharing, or should we keep that up? It's hard to see everyone.
Yeah, we can stop screen sharing. That'd be fine.
Super. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Josh.
Hi, great. Coming to this discussion live from my car right now. So thanks. I think it's been a great discussion. I really appreciate kind of the focus on safety and trying to make it easier for people who want to get around by bike to be able to do so in the community. People made a lot of great points. I think another couple points that I'd like to make are, first of all, there are so many schools that are along Connecticut Avenue. Right now, there's no safe way for children to be able to bike to any of the schools that are around there. Deal, Wilson, the schools that are further down Connecticut Avenue in the Van Ness and Cleveland Park and Woodley Park areas. With a protected bike lane, it would be really easy for middle school and high school students to be able to get to those schools in ways other than having their parents drive them in their car. So that's one point. I think the other point that I'll close with, because I know there's lots of other people who would like to comment, are that I'm sure most of the people on this commission and listening in, they want to do the right thing for the environment. They want to do the right thing to make it easier for people who don't want to drive. And this is great. We have a chance right here in front of us to do exactly that. So that's why I'm really excited about this project and can't wait to see what happens next. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, can we get Steve Seelig up and Thomas Nemo?
Steve, can you hear us?
Okay, I don't know if you can see me. Hi,
Yeah.
everybody, thanks. I feel a special kinship with Chris Frombeluti because but for there being 3 houses, I'd actually be in his district. So I'm on the other side of Reno Road. And so I just want to make a few comments about some of the things I've heard from some of the ANC members who seem to be very excited about getting this. So this whole concept about having an alternative route for cyclists somewhere that's not on the avenue, that is the path to ruin for really having any type of way for people to go downtown. What Josh Rising didn't tell you is that he used to ride up and down Connecticut Avenue. I don't know how he does it. He's terrified of doing that. So I'd encourage us to really focus on what's before us. Connie, I agree. Let's get a protected bike lane on Broad Branch also. Let's do that. That makes great sense if we're concerned about some of the cut through traffic. I'd also have an emphasis on this whole parking issue. I've heard some commissioners mention we're going to lose all this parking. DDOT needs to do a better job, and we should insist they do a better job of analyzing what the parking use is currently. DDOT has done this on other projects, most notably the Ton Law project. They actually took pictures to see how much excess capacity exists. I also sent a link to the ANC. The ANC can see that there's 375 parking places off the street in Chevy Chase. That's not even counting the parking places on the side streets. So to say we're going to lose 100 parking places and never get them back, that's not been proven. I think we need to look at that before we take that type of position. The other thing that I really wanted to say, and I posted this to the chat, but I really would hope that DDOT gets on their horse on this one, is once COVID is over, I'm not going back to my office. Not that I might have a job, but if I do have a job, my company is not inviting me back. And there are numerous companies that are not going to be inviting their people back down to K Street to drive through. And so it seems to me that we need to at least put forth some analysis of data that suggests if we have a 10% reduction, which I think is modest, what we're going to look like, let's say at Nebraska Avenue, which is one of Chris's concerns. So those are my comments. I hope the commissioners who have expressed antipathy towards this idea would reconsider and really think about the benefits this is going to provide to the neighborhood. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Thomas Nemo next. Thanks, Steve.
Thomas, you're connected with us. You're muted.
Hello,
Hey, Thomas, we
can
can
you
hear
hear me
you.
now?
Yes.
Hello. We are in the era of Zoom and I still don't know how to use it properly. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for having this. I just wanted to say that definitely in the era of Zoom, it does make it a lot easier for people like myself to be able to participate. And I just wanted to share a couple things quickly. First off, as someone who lives down in Cleveland Park, I absolutely would, in my estimation, solicit businesses up and your end of the avenue more frequently if there was a safe bike facility to be able to use. I used to commute by bike almost exclusively when I lived in Berlin. And unfortunately, I do not feel safe being able to bike around DC. And as one person mentioned about all the schools, I think it's important to think of not just protected bike lanes as being safe for, young children who like bike lanes. The phrase is always 8 to 80, that, protected bike lanes make it safe for people of all ages. And this would allow people to also potentially pick up biking in their later years. You see a lot of these electric assist bikes these days that, might be able to help people who are older also get around town, get up the hill with a little bit of battery assist. I actually had one quick question for the DDOT representative. One of the things that I was hoping that this might include is what's called continuous sidewalks, which would be keeping the sidewalk at the same grade at all of the cross streets, or at least all of the residential cross streets. You see this in a lot of European countries these days, or European cities, and it really does help to slow traffic as people are entering more residential, areas. And yeah, I was wondering if that was being considered. I don't know if the DDOT rep is still there.
Yeah, this is Ed. I'm still here. We have not considered continuous sidewalks, but I've made a note of that and we can take that back to the team.
That would be fantastic. Thank you. And I guess thank you all for having this thing this evening. I'm all set.
Okay, the last person with a hand up is Ezra.
Hello, third try. Okay, hello everyone.
Hi,
Thanks for taking my questions and comments. I agree with what a lot of other people have said today. I bike on Connecticut Avenue now because my parents live on it, and it is scary and dangerous every time, even when there aren't too many cars. That just makes them go faster. I just wanted to point out one thing that I don't think anybody's mentioned, which is part of the reason it's very dangerous right now to bike on Connecticut Avenue with cars, is that it's very steep if you're going north. And so, no matter how good a cyclist you are, you're going to go fairly slow, which means that you get in the way of cars more. It just leads to more conflicts. Also, for a lot of people trying to cross the park to get to Connecticut Avenue, you have to take very steep streets like Tilden, for example. So often when I go, to avoid having to take that very steep road, I'll actually go much further south all the way to Calvert Street in Adams Morgan, which is nice because I don't have to deal with any super hard hills out of the park, but it means even more time on Connecticut Avenue as I, retrace my steps back up. And that also gets into this idea of, well, can't we just do some other route that goes sort of near Connecticut so that bikes can go down that way? And I just think that will make it much harder for new people to be encouraged to take their bike. If there's a complicated route, if they have to stop constantly and figure out which way to go, where's the route? I think those areas tend to also be much steeper with a lot more up and down hills as compared to just being directly on Connecticut itself. So I personally would love to see a bike lane on Connecticut Avenue, a protected bike lane in both directions. And I know I can speak for my parents who would love to know that they don't have to worry about me every time I try to come visit them in Van Ness. So thanks very much for considering this. I hope to see a bike lane on Connecticut Avenue soon.
Thank you, Ezra. Randy, you're muted. There's also some questions in the chat.
Yeah,
For the QA.
I think the ones in the Q&A have been mostly answered, though, or at least there's been discussion. A lot of them are comments rather than questions.
Well,
are there any?
Okay. Whatever.
Are there any that you think we should cover now?
The first one is, they might could answer fairly quickly. And Ed, I don't know if you could see the chat, but it says, did DDOT consider moving the curbs?
I think that's the limit of the
That's
60 foot.
yeah, that's the limitation as part of the
Yeah.
study, is not to move the curves. Yes.
Okay.
And I think the next one has been discussed.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think that one has also been discussed. Chris brought that up.
Okay.
So
Just a note, if you move the curbs, you kill all the trees on both sides of the street.
that's true. Okay, anything else? We're gonna have plenty of opportunity to discuss this in the future. This is not our last chance to consider the recommendations for Connecticut Avenue, and we'll be back on this topic again in the future. Ed and your team, we thank you very much for your presentation. We thank everyone who has participated both through the chat and the Q&A and those who spoke. We will, by the way, have a copy of all the Q&A and the chat so that we'll be able to follow all of that. And we'll be staying in touch with DDOT throughout this process.
Great. And I would encourage folks to use the email address, the project email address. Send us your thoughts, your questions, your comments, and we'll aggregate all of those and try to get answers for you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
You bet.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the discussion and possible vote on a grant application by Chevy Chase Main Street, with Commissioners Chang and Goslin presenting this. I do have one thing to report, and that is I was tasked at our last meeting to check this application out with Gottlieb Simon at the Office of Advisory Neighborhood Commissioners. And he said pretty unequivocally that this is not an allowable grant. He said, since the specific uses of the funds and the specific entities receiving the funds are not provided in the application, we believe this is in effect an impermissible delegation of ANC authority. And he's got other reasoning as well, but what I would suggest at this point is that we table this and that we work further with Chevy Chase Main Street to see if there is a way that we can formulate the application that will pass muster with OANC and see if we can work this out. I would just defer this until a later meeting, and I will, or Connie and Peter can undertake with District Bridges and with Chevy Chase Main Street to try to work out something that's going to be acceptable to Gottlieb.
Okay, I think Peter and I can do that. We could work
Okay.
together after the meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm sorry we can't deal with that now, and this is not the first time we've had difficulties getting something approved through OANC, and we've been able in some instances, as recently as last summer, with Ward 3 mutual aid, where Gottlieb said we couldn't do it. We worked out a way, worked around his problem, and we were able to do it. So maybe we can do the same thing this time. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the performance oversight hearings. And we've got two pieces of testimony, one that I've drafted and one that Lisa has drafted. Lisa, you want to present the one on Department of Transportation?
Yes, so everyone should have seen it. And Michael, I did get your email, but I was unable to tell where your draft comments were inserted. So
I sent them in track change, the Word document on your DDOT testimony.
yeah, it's just not showing that way on my iPad.
I was able to get it.
You have to download it first.
You have to download it.
download it. If you can't just view it because it won't show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did download it on my iPad and it's not showing
okay.
up in track changes.
Yeah,
So
you have to download it to Word
No, she does it in Pages.
pages.
I don't.
As do I. As do I.
All right. Well,
so everyone though saw the testimony. It kind of focuses on DDOT's continued lack of communication and ability to kind of work with the community to keep the community informed and to respond timely. The issues that I highlighted in there, Chestnut Street sidewalk project, Slow Street, our interaction with them on that. I put Commissioner Gosselin's information that he had on submitted to me, and I can't think of the name of that right now, Peter.
Military Road.
Military Road.
Chevy Chase Parkway.
Thank you. And then maintenance of infrastructure with a special emphasis on green infrastructure. So bioretention cells, impervious pavement. And Connie, I can cover your comments hopefully in testimony. And Michael, that's what I would propose to you as well. I'm not sure what your changes were, so I don't know if everyone has had a chance to see that before we vote on it. That's my only concern. If everybody saw his changes and they're okay, I'll be okay with it.
I looked at the changes very briefly, and aside from a few typos, I thought they were probably okay. They're not extensive. And I think we could probably incorporate them if you think they're okay, Lisa, after you take a look at them.
mine are just very few at the very end, Lisa.
Right.
Okay.
It's in the
Basically, Lisa,
infrastructure maintenance part.
Okay.
There's one, it just says you want to concentrate on one big issue, and I say two, communication, and I say sort of timeliness of response. And then at the very bottom, I just say, we don't hear from you, your communications point, and it takes forever and a day to get things done. So
Thank you for pointing that out. I see it on there, Michael. That's acceptable. I'm fine with that. Okay.
Okay.
And again, I'm sorry for the delay. I just was in the dentist.
Yeah, no problem. I just couldn't tell where your changes were, but you pointed them out, and I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So any other questions on the DDOT testimony? Okay, so I move that the commission accept the DDOT testimony for tomorrow's oversight hearing.
Second. All those in favor? 7-0. Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
For your maiden voyage into testimony, it was great. It was great testimony.
I will point out too, at
a lot of it was Randy.
Well, at today's hearing before the same committee, there were a lot of questions about the infrastructure issue that you described at the end, the infrastructure maintenance issue. And several of the council members, I think Councilmember Henderson and Che in particular, were interested in what DOEE was doing. And as I mentioned to you, I think in an email, DOEE is doing a study to look at the efficacy of their maintenance programs and whether they're actually diverting stormwater. And that's supposed to be done by the summer. So you might anticipate that there could be some questions about that from DDOT standpoint too. Okay, the other piece of testimony is very short, and it deals with the Office of Chief Technology Officer, and it's basically a repeat of the testimony that we gave for the OANC, urging Acho this time to help the commission to communicate among commissioners, and also to help the commissioners communicate better with their constituents. And this is an issue that I know the chair of the committee, Robert White, is interested in. And I think he will, now that he has oversight of Acho as well as OANC, I think he will try to put something together where we can actually address these issues more comprehensively than we ever have in the past. And I think that's going to be advantageous. So I would move that we adopt the testimony that I've circulated and that we presented at the Acho hearing tomorrow. Second, all those in favor? Lisa?
It's up.
Oh, okay,
7-0.
there you go. Okay, 7-0. All right, finally, Peter, you have a resolution with regard to the community engagement for the small area plan. You want to introduce that resolution? You're muted.
You should all have received copies. I've incorporated Connie's and Randy's edits. This is our chance. Our predecessor ANC worked hard to get us this opportunity to do this plan. I think there is some reason to be cynical and skeptical about that it will do what it really needs to do, but I think we should not think of this as OP's small area planning process, but ours. And we have seen in our conversations about our discussion of the racism task force reports, differences between us. We have heard differences from the community. All these conversations have to be had, and they have to be had publicly among us, democratically among us. And it's our best hope to get the kind of consensus that we're going to need, both for the community to do this more or less together, but also to build the constituency that lets us have some leverage when people object to are trying to do some of the affordable housing things that I think there's a broad consensus in this group to do. So what this resolution tries to do is encourage OP to implement a more robust process. I think if we could just get the first couple of meetings under our belts, the community meetings, that there would be a groundswell of interest that would back up the notion that we need to do a more robust process. Robust means more meetings at different times, asking them to consider having a professional facilitator, and the potential to go beyond the fiscal year. And I know that that's caused some questions. Actually, I think Lisa asked them, Randy asked them, Connie asked them, and Michael asked them. And look, if you want to drop that, that's fine. My own sense about this is that if in fact this develops the way I hope it does, which is a really full conversation with the community where there are going to be objections, there are going to be issues that come up, and it heads us past September, then I think we can get creative. Maybe we spend some of the ANC budget. Maybe we do a little fundraising. I'm happy to contribute a substantial amount. Maybe we go to foundations, but that's something we won't know until I mean, I may be wrong about this entirely. Nobody may show up, right? And I mean, then I think we have a terrible problem on our hands when we start doing these projects. But I mean, so anyways, that's what this resolution is intended to do. You may want to drop paragraph 12. I hope you don't, but that is the one that suggests that we ask for the opportunity, should it be needed, to go beyond whatever the public money, where the budget for the public money. And I'm happy to take edits, and I'm happy to take friendly amendments, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Well, my point with paragraph 12 was simply that there's a trade-off, that we are anxious to get the planning process going for the community center, particularly because we need those improvements to the community center, and they're delayed already. So if we delay completing a small area plan, it's probably going to delay the completion or the beginning of the planning process for the community center, because they build on each other. And so it's just a matter of whether it's better to spend another 3 or 4 months on the small area plan and then take the delay that it's going to mean for the community center.
So I'd give 2 answers. One is that, I mean, I'm a new commissioner, but I mean, I think you have to know this in your gut. The process that these things have taken already is going on and on and on. Yeah. We're talking about a few months at the end. If where we are in the conversation justifies it, it seems to me that what the benefit you get out of that, if in fact we're having a robust conversation and there are still issues that need to be addressed, you know, those few months are going to gain us, or could gain us, the consensus that would mean that we can answer people who say, the abutters to the community center library site who say, you know, too many cars, we haven't done this, we haven't done that. It's a real trade-off, but I think this is our best bet for building a broad community consensus for doing something first and foremost at that site. And so what we lose in a couple more months, we gain in greater consensus, I hope. Again, it's open-ended. I hope the wording is that we ask them to consider this or something like that, but you know.
Well, yeah, that last sentence, I might say, instead of consider adopting, consider
extending
some flexibility.
Yeah.
If in the calendar, if needed.
Okay.
If what I was going to add is, you know, it's not to extend it for extending its sake, but to extend it because they will add more meetings,
Okay,
so that the public meetings have a longer, like there's between the 3 public meetings, there's time in between for OP to be able to get the community's input and tee them up, you know, tee the community up for the next exercise. And if that's too compressed, and we can't add more meetings in between, then logically it means that you'd have to just push it out more. And I'm supportive of that. And I don't think Erkin would be not supportive of it. I think it's just, it's resources, right? And whether or not he can.
Okay. Would somebody make this as a friendly amendment? Something like the last sentence being, it asked the Office of Plan to consider some flexibility in timing or in the calendar if needed to address all community concerns.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, or ongoing
Right.
community concerns.
Right.
That works.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Peter?
Yes, John.
One thing, yeah, the idea of an independent facilitator is obviously a good idea. And I don't know if you got my note, but I'm just wondering, in addition to having an independent facilitator, is this the proper place to assert that we also would like to have independent sources of information apart from the OP?
Yeah, look, I'm sort of coming around to Connie and Randy's proposal. I mean, I suspect that OP is going to spend a lot of time talking about what OP thinks, and I don't know what. I guess, John, are you suggesting that we put a paragraph in here that asks them to have independent sources of information, or are you saying that, is this your way of saying that we should do the Connie Randy proposal, which is the ANC does it?
Yeah, well, I just preserve the element that we can develop, or that we should be able to develop our own information, however we go about that.
I think we will always have that opportunity to do that. And I hope we're going to exercise that opportunity.
Right.
Okay.
I think the question is timing. So if OP takes this resolution to heart and puts dates on the calendar, adds meetings so we know when they might be. And if it looks like, and if it looks like our community still has questions, but OP is swamped getting the stuff done for the small area plan, but there's other questions, I think we could then, as Randy just said, and what John is suggesting and what my proposal proposes, is that we, in parallel, we're trying to get more community input so it inserts into this process. It's not to duplicate it. It's not to be a replacement of it, but it is to be in addition to it so that we're all on the same page.
Okay, and so, but just to understand, since we have that right anyways, do you think there needs to be some mention of that in this resolution? No. Okay.
No.
Okay, that's what I was confused about. Whether okay.
No, I don't think so.
So are there other questions?
Let's take a vote.
I move that we pass a resolution requesting the Office of Planning adopt a more engaged and collaborative process for developing the Chevy Chase small area plan. Second.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-0. Okay. Commission business.
Can I just ask one question? Lisa, you said that you're your own SMD meeting?
Yes.
Is that right? Because I was wondering, Randy, if, adjunct to what Peter is proposing here, should we be in our next administrative meeting to talk about how we might hold some individual SMD meetings around these issues of the small area plan? Because each SMD may have a different perspective than, the broad ANC.
Yep.
Well, Michael, you should know that I've and I think Lisa may be doing the same. I've prepared a leaflet. I'm going to leaflet my entire SMD this week, telling them about the meeting and why they should show up.
No, but I'm talking.
I know, I'm in meetings. I'm just saying, but communicating with your SMD is really important to make this work.
Yeah, I understand. We're trying to create a listserv for ours, but it's proving, sort of a very manual process. But if you have a leaflet that you could share electronically
by Lisa, I mean, it's got art in it now too.
Yeah, well, but I'm saying if you could share it, then maybe we each can leaflet in our own SMDs, because as I've said multiple times, the listservs that exist just have too many gaps.
Yeah. So I'm happy to do that. I just want it understood if I share it. This is a communication with my constituents, so I'm not asking for your approval of it.
Right.
You can use it or not as you like, but I mean, this is me talking to them. So you can use. So I'm happy to share it. So.
That's very disappointing. I thought you sought my approval for everything.
and you're willing to question and give it. Sometimes there's
okay. Let's finish up here, guys. Minutes. We have 3 minutes to approve that Lisa has circulated for January 25th, February 4th, and February 8th. Any changes or modifications to those circulated minutes? Is there a motion, Lisa, to adopt them?
Yep, I move to adopt the minutes from the January 25th, February 4th, and February 8th meetings.
Second. All those in favor?
Connie,
I can't see, but I assume, yes, there she is.
Okay.
Okay, there is one check I just got from Stephanie today, a Verizon check for $155.14. And I move that we approve the payment of that check to Verizon for the monthly bill, I think for February. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Randy,
Yes.
what was the amount of the check?
$155.14.
No energy surge pricing.
No. Okay, and then the items for the March 8th meeting, we've got a number of performance oversight hearings for DCPS, Department of Aging and Community Living, DC Water, WMATA, DCRA, and Department of Health. And then we've also supposed to have a presentation from the mayor, a deputy mayor, or a department head about the mayor's budget process, which we were supposed to have had tonight, but we didn't. And then discussion and possible vote on the task force on racism's recommendations. Those are the things I have for next meeting.
Where's the surveillance thing that I thought we were going to do?
Well, yeah, we moved it again.
Move it.
Yep.
Yeah, just because we have so much on the agenda.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is going to be a very busy, another very busy meeting. Okay. Thank you all. And we appreciate all the participation by everyone who attended. Thank you.
Yep. And you'll send me the tape, Randy.
As usual. Yep. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.